Well, hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Certified Forgotten. We are still your favorite show, your dad's favorite show, your crazy uncle's favorite show that talks about horror films with 10 or fewer reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. It is our niche. We stick with it. And honestly, we're in 100 plus episodes at this point, and we still haven't run out of really cool movies to talk about. So we must be doing something right. We alternate here at Certified Forgotten, sometimes on par about every week or every other week. Donato and I have an amazing guest. Sometimes it's just the two of us talking about a new release. And we're going to introduce our guests in just a second, but we're really excited to have a pair of filmmakers that we both know on the show today. Isn't that right, Donato?
Yes, and known in different capacities. I made mention of this before when we were chatting, but one I know from tabletopping, the other I know is being a hell of a programmer at South by Southwest. But it's always fun when you can have a new conversation with people because it's a completely new adventure for both of them.
Yes, I agree with that. And it is interesting having been, on the other end of a TTRPG table with at least one of our guests today to try and see those storytelling ideas come to life on the screen. I'm super into that as well. So, Donato, if you can do introductions, please.
Absolutely. With us today, we have Peter Hall and Paul Gandersman, writers and directors of the upcoming Man Find Tape, premiering at Tribeca Film Festival.
Hello. Thank you so much for having us.
Hello, this is Peter talking.
And this is Paul. This is Paul. Yes, I forget this is audio.
Thank you.
That actually is necessary because we don't really have these 4-person episodes that often. It's usually the two Matts, me and Mr. Monagle, and our guests. So it is good to actually put the name with the voice because we are an audio podcast.
Yeah.
Now, luckily, I come from a career in marketing, so I'm very good at starting with, I've spent the last few years in Zoom meetings. So I'm like, Paul, we'll start with you. Peter, we'll start with you. So to get us kicked off here, let's talk a little bit about the beginning of your collaboration together. I know that you guys have worked on short films together. You wrote a book together, a book that I happen to like quite a bit. Thank you very much. And this is your feature film debut. So Paul, we'll start with you. How did the two of you find each other and become co-creators, co-writers, and co-directors?
Well, many, many years ago, back in 2010, so 15 years ago, Peter and I met helping to produce Emily Hagan's third feature film when she was 17. Just let that sink in. Called My Sucky Teen Romance, and we formed Arcanum Pictures back then. We then worked with Emily on a handful of projects over the years, and Peter and I kind of really kept aligning more and more on what we liked in cinema and wanting to work together, and we were brainstorming lots of ideas, and that eventually led to us making our first short film together, Give or Take Her, back in 2016, 9 years ago. And then after that, we were just trying to put together a feature for a long time and kind of trying to push a boulder up a mountain with what became the Dead Friends Society. That became our kind of pandemic project when we didn't know if anyone would ever make a movie again. We're like, well, let's try writing a book. So we adapted that into a book. And then shortly after that, kind of started talking about what's a film we can make that nobody can say no to us, that we could do for as little money as possible and control the destiny of. And that's how we ended up here. But yeah, so we've been 15 years together and just now finally got that first feature going, which honestly I'm thankful for, because I think we kind of probably didn't have much to say 15 years ago. In our 20s, we're just kind of like, we love movies. And I think in that, I'm 40, Peter's almost 40, and we kind of developed a bit of a worldview in that time.
Peter, would you agree with that? Is that the story you would say?
It is. It's interesting to think of it backwards like that, because Paul and I didn't start out as creative collaborators. We were working on other people's projects together, and then it did just sort of naturally emerge, well, why don't we work on our own projects together? And there was an initial plan where Paul would direct and I would write, and those were technically how the roles on Give or Take Her played out. But then I think in the making of Give or Take Her, we sort of realized, like, well, why don't we both just do each part of this process together? And that's when we started developing other script ideas together and writing together. And And it took several more years after that to get things going, but it all happened quite organically.
Can you just go a little deeper into that collaboration point? Because for someone like myself, I like working with a partner. If I was ever to do like a film commentary, for example, I fear doing that by myself, and I need somebody else there with me to help me. But I know other people work so very differently. So just what you explained, like you had director and writer separate on your short. How did that naturally become a collaboration between the two of you doing both jobs? Was it you both looking at things and trying to be like, well, I want to be involved there, or did it just kind of like happen naturally?
I can speak to this. I think, Peter and I have developed a really amazing partnership where we both trust each other implicitly, and we both believe that if one of us thinks something's a good idea but the other doesn't, then it's not a good idea. The good ideas it's not Peter's voice, it's not my voice, it's this third voice that gets created in the middle. And I think we just kind of figured that out. It was pretty informal. I think one day we just sat, we were doing that. There was so much overlap going on in the writing, in the direction. And then one day we just sat down and had a conversation, and we were just like, would you be comfortable with me co-writing and I'm comfortable with you co-directing? And we both said wanted that very much. And so I think that was kind of the thing that I think freed us, because neither of us felt like there was any kind of like stepping on each other's toes, like, Peter's the writer, I'm giving too many writing notes or things like that. Once we both just kind of broke down that barrier of who did what, it just became now a relationship of constantly challenging each other, and having a partner that we can trust. I don't know, Peter, what do you got? What's your?
I agree completely, and I'm also wouldn't want to do something like Man Finds Tape solo. Like it is inconceivable to me. I'm an inherently lazy person, so having a partner who holds you accountable is good. Like there's the mindset of like, when I was doing things solo, it was a bit more, yeah, I'll get to it. And now it's like, oh shit, I got pages I got to get to Paul. Like something has to be due to somebody else. And so I think just on a fundamental level, it makes both of us more productive because we have to deliver something to the other person. And that's when we're writing. And then in the making of this film on set, it was so organic, so natural. It was interesting. The cinematographer, David Kuhn, had worked with Paul many times before. They've done, he can talk about it a bit later, but they had worked together before we had worked together. And on like day 2, Kuhn pulled me aside and was just like, hey, I just want to let you know that I was actually a little anxious about working for 2 directors because I had never worked with 2 directors before, but I cannot believe how seamless this is. And it doesn't feel like, oh, I need to go to one person to talk about this thing and then to the other person to talk about that thing. It was all just a very congealed, harmonious process.
My quick follow-up before I hand it back to Monagle to take over. Did it help having, the Rustic Boys involved with Dave, Aaron, and Justin? Because right there, Aaron and Justin are one of the few collaborators who work together really well. So, like, did they give you pointers on being a duo? To
unpack that a little bit, we were talking to some friends in LA a couple of years ago, and one friend in particular, and we were talking about this idea that Paul and I were going to write and direct together, doing both roles. And we're told that's a bad idea. People can't wrap their head around 2 people doing it. So like their advice to us was, you guys can do that on set, but one of you should take one credit and one of you should take the other credit. And we almost kind of bought into that for a little bit. And then when we first started talking to the Rustic guys, Dave was just like, no, that's stupid. Like Justin and Aaron have no issues with that whatsoever. We didn't really know Dave and Justin and Aaron going into this that well. And so it was, I think the fact that they are a duo meant that there was never questioning Paul and I as a duo. They were so used to it, and it makes so much sense to them that it just made sense for us. And Dave, Justin and Aaron were off shooting Daredevil during principal photography. They came the last 2 or 3 days of our filming. They had just wrapped Daredevil and they flew from New York to us. But Dave, one of the things that I'm sure he made a concerted effort to do this, but I clocked it very early on when we started working together, was that he would always ask both of us a question. And it was kind of interesting because there are times that like we created a Slack channel with Dave and Paul and I and a couple other people, and then Paul and I have our own little writers room Slack channel where we're always talking to each other. And it was interesting where Dave might ask a question in the main channel. Paul and I discuss the answer, privately. And then one of us would come back and post the answer. And then Dave would be like, "Oh, are you good with that, Peter?" And be like, "Oh yeah. We don't give the answer until we've both agreed on it." But Dave made very sure, and he does it when we're talking to people outside of the team as well, that it's coming from the both of us.
That's funny. It makes me think of, the collaborative partnerships makes me think of like relationships too, and the compromises you make in there. But I think one thing you don't realize until you're kind of in a long-term relationship is that the unified front is just as important up as it is down. Like a lot of people are like, mom and dad are aligned for kids, but like with your in-laws, you also need to have kind of those moments where you're like, okay, they have influence, they have authority, and we need to make sure that we're on the same page and approaching it consistently. So I really feel like in a beautiful kind of way, the fact that you had so much time to figure out your dynamic prior to jumping into this feature, I will never know, but I imagine it would have been a much harder proposition as a duo if you were 2-3 years into a partnership and then making your first feature. A lot of opportunities for you to not know those boundaries and not know each other as well. But 15 years later, there's not a lot of surprises anybody could throw at you. There's not a lot of ego that you haven't sort of hashed out between the two of you.
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. While 10 years ago, I probably wished we were getting our first feature made sooner. I'm very thankful in hindsight the way all the timing played out and how we were able to really mature as creatives and in our partnership to get to this point, to be ready for it, to not have to make big mistakes. And one of the things you mentioned that I want to key in on, you use the word compromise. And I think when you figure out the right creative relationship, I can't speak for everybody. I don't feel like I don't think anything we do is a compromise, if that makes sense. Because to me, compromise is like, it's not really what I love, but I'm willing to compromise for you to be happy, sort of thing. I feel like every solution Peter and I end up with, again, speaking about that third voice, it is about the thing that we both want, and it ends up being better than either of the individual ideas. So it's kind of, I'm not knocking the word compromise, but I don't feel like I compromised on anything, and I imagine Peter feels the same.
Yeah, and I think part of that comes from our background as producers, where we are, taking Emily's films for example. It's the film itself is the thing that needs to be serviced. So it's always finding what solution fits that third thing best. And so once we started doing that on our own, it was a natural, like we sort of cycle through putting on different hats. And so it's like, okay, now we're putting on our writer hats and we're going to pass this back and forth. And then I might churn out, 10 pages of something. And then I send it to Paul. And before Paul even necessarily is putting on his writer's hat, he's putting on a producer's hat, a director's hat. He's looking at it through one lens. And so we're constantly iterating it through these different things. And it's like putting rocks in a tumbler, where over time, it just all sort of gets polished together.
I like the idea of growing into it too. The way you've both kind of said, of course, you wish you made your movie a decade ago when it was in your 20s, all the early 30s, all that stuff. But I don't know. I see so many times with indie movies, specifically, there is a rush to get them made just to get your first movie out there. And I've seen that backfire so many times. So, the way you're talking about, sure, we wish we did it earlier, but now we're just in such a better headspace. I think that is a valuable lesson, because it's not just about making your movie. I don't want to, anyone can make a movie, but like to be in the right space at the time of your life and to have the right resources, the right team, all those things. I just think there's so much more to waiting for the right circumstances as much as making your movie. It's like, if I ever went to Vegas in my 20s, I would have made some mistakes.
Yeah.
I'm glad I waited until my 30s to get to Vegas. I was much more mature. I was in a better headspace. But it's a silly comparison, but I really do believe that for indie film specifically, it's your first chance for a feature debut to like, this is your coming out as filmmakers, and to hear that like you took your time in a little bit, other people could benefit from hearing that as well.
Yeah, we were very intentional about it. In particular, once we settled on like, okay, we are going to make a film that we write and direct together, we were then very intentional about what kind of film and how to make that film, and knowing what the pitfalls would be ahead of time and identifying all of that stuff. So I do think that you have that sort of rush and urgency of like, oh, I gotta do it right away, or I'm never gonna do it. And I don't know that Paul and I were like super deliberate in being like, oh, let's take our time and figure it out. But like he was saying, in retrospect, it worked out so beautifully for us that it wasn't handed to us 5-10 years ago. We had to slowly build it ourselves.
And Paul, you said, let's talk about Man Finds Tape. You said that you really wanted to make a movie that somebody couldn't say no to. That was kind of the way you described going out and getting backing for this and turning this into a real thing. What made Man Finds Tape the right story, the right concept, the right world? How did you guys land on this being the thing that people couldn't say no to? And Paul, we'll start with you.
Yeah, well, I think I'll talk about a little bit of the thought process that went into what kind of movie to make, and then maybe Peter can talk about the actual story of it. So, like I mentioned, we were pushing the boulder up a mountain trying to get the Dead Friends Society made, and that's a story that means a lot to us, but ultimately just has a certain kind of budget floor that was out of reach for our position in the industry. And I'm glad that I'm not glad the pandemic happened, but I'm glad we took the opportunity to use that time to get that story out of ourselves and onto the page, so it's out in the world and we don't have to think about it. And if we get the chance to make it as a movie one day, great. But if not, we got that story out of ourselves, right? We exercised that demon. So when, it was January 2021, where Peter and I had a conversation about, the struggles we've had trying to get that movie made and coming up with something that taps into our strengths. And if we needed to just get together 50 grand and a cheap camera, like we could just make, right? And so we talked about our superpowers, our strengths. We quickly talked about how I've been working in documentary storytelling for about a decade. And we have a documentary cinematographer, we have documentary editor, I've edited documentaries, all that kind of stuff. So of course, that kind of found footage documentary style affords you the opportunity for it to be cheaper, right? It can't have all of this beautiful, perfect cinematography and lighting, right? Like it's so built into that, inherent in the format is a lower cost. So we started with that. With that kind of parameter, with that box. Let's work in this box, and where does that get us? And then we kind of started talking about themes that were interesting to us, and also in that format, things we like and things we don't like. And one of the things we don't like that happens in many, many, fictional documentaries, found footage films, is the moment, even in films that I love, the moment of why are they still filming? Why is this character still filming? And so we kind of came up with a rule before we figured out the story of that cannot happen in this film. And so we built it into the characters and into the themes, that the characters themselves are the documentarians. We built it into their character arcs, why one is filming heavily and the other isn't. And then they kind of trade places by the end and that sort of thing. And so it was really just about coming up with the puzzle and then kind of emotionally, storytelling wise, find ourselves, within it. And then Peter, why don't you talk a bit about how we kind of landed on this specific story within those parameters?
Yeah, once we sort of decided the fake documentary, we looked at what story made sense to tell that way. And several years before that, we had written, or at least outlined, a fictional podcast, an entirely scripted podcast that was going to be about an investigative journalist who comes across this disturbing piece of footage and then goes to go investigate it. So we had those sort of ideas already wormed into our brain, and so then when we got to the doc side of this, it was like, okay, let's pull that out of the drawer and figure out how to make it in this format. And it's interesting that I would flip the phrasing of what you were saying, Monocle, or what Paul had said earlier, which is that we weren't trying to make a film that was like so good no one could say no to it. It was more so we were trying to make a film that we didn't need anyone else to say yes to. We didn't need anyone else to give us permission to make it. We were trying to come up with what is the most frictionless thing that we can do. And then it just worked out phenomenally well to have Rustic come on board. We had seen Something in the Dirt, which was a film that the three of them, Justin, Aaron, and Dave, made in their apartment during the pandemic. And if no one has seen that film, and no one has seen our film at this point, but they both have a fake documentary aspect to them. They both have very heavy use of mixed media. And so what happened was I reached out to Dave, who I didn't know that well, and asked if we could pick his brain about the logistics of making a film that had the same challenges that we were about to go into. And he said, sure, and sent him the script. And then he read it, and he wanted to come on board as a producer and help us. And then Paul asked, well, what about Justin and Aaron? And he said, well, it's very rare that the three of us want to make something together. Like, a lot of people think they know what Justin and Aaron like, but it's not always what they want to do. And so he sent it to them, and we didn't hear anything for like 3 or 4 months. And so we thought, okay, well, I guess Justin and Aaron thought it was a piece of shit. They don't want to do it. Yeah. And then, but then they came back around out of the middle of nowhere, and had set up a call with us. And then it was like 10 minutes into the call that Aaron was like, oh, by the way, we want to make this movie. Like, the script is awesome. We were like, oh, great. So it was a very smooth process because we had designed it to be smooth. Paul and I were trying to come up with, if everyone passes on this, if we don't have to go out to pitch it to people, we don't have to like get $10 million to get this thing going. We are going to make something that, it'd be nice if someone came and brought a bunch of money to the table, but if they don't, we can still make this movie.
And I want to talk a little bit about this movie gets its world premiere. If you're listening to this, on Friday the 6th, the world premiere is happening this weekend at Tribeca. There's a couple of showings. If you're in New York, you should definitely go take a look. And I want to be careful about what we talk about because nobody has seen this film yet. But there is a specificity to the way that you're doing found footage. Like, found footage has a lot of different connotations, right? It can be like a Deadstream style. It can be, Blair Witch Project style. But there is a rise within the last couple of years of, I have family members that are obsessed with Mr. Ballin, like a specific type of YouTube, TikTok video storyteller who's kind of a weird quasi narrator role in these like horrible, horrific, true crime kind of stories. How deep did you go? And I'll start with you, Peter. How deep did you go into the world of all of these like true crime storytellers? Because a lot of what happens in Man Finds Tape feels very akin to the kind of stuff that I know that my family is like watching on a Thursday night.
We didn't do a very thorough deep dive into, okay, here's, putting together a top 10 list of here's the best that have done it. And we're going to take this from these 2 projects and this from these other 2 projects. We didn't really reverse engineer it from that idea. It was more so we wanted to match what it feels like to go down like a Reddit rabbit hole at 2 a.m. where you come across someone's creepypasta story and you're like, oh shit, this is interesting. And sort of having a story that feels like it's unfolding and being discovered as you're participating in it was sort of always the goal. So yeah, we didn't identify one single, creator or anything like that we wanted to mimic. It was more so what can we write that'll give us that vibe that for someone else would come across and be like, oh shit, this feels like reading something on No Sleep or it reminds me of my favorite creepypasta kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think too, it's kind of, found footage, fake documentaries have been around a long time. And as and I think this happens in horror cinema in general, as technology improves, it makes it harder to write in the modern age. Why don't they just pick up the cell phone and call, right? And so, in Scream or whatever, right? Like or any kind of horror movie, it's become a challenge, and I think it's a challenge, an interesting challenge in the fake documentary / found footage space, because back when Blair Witch came out, right? They don't have all the technology we have today, and so we wanted to figure out how to make something in this format that leaned into the modern age. The film takes place in 2024. Social media is a part of it. YouTube is a part of it. Mm-hmm. The camera technology is a part of it. We couldn't just hide things while there is like mini DV footage in the film, we couldn't just shoot with a bunch of VHS cameras that are zoomed in and shaky and be like, oh, you can't really see it. Because a modern audience would just be like, well, that's fake. That's not how things are. And so that was a challenge, and we're trying to hopefully make something that feels interesting and fresh in a genre that's been done a lot.
Yeah, and it's, I think, even into the technology aspect of it, found footage, faux doc, they've been trying this for a while, Screen Life, there's so many iterations of found footage at this point, and depending on who you talk to, if it's like Rob Hunter, none of that's found footage, that's a conversation for another date. That's his own prickliness. But no, I mean, again, it's beyond the technical. I think it's so easy to fall out of a film that is doing faux doc and YouTube, because you watch something like Deadstream and it feels authentic because that is such a YouTuber experience, or you watch something like Strange Harvest, which is coming up soon, or go back to the Poughkeepsie tapes. Those interstitials and the interviews subjects, like, again, those feel natural, where it becomes like so unnatural at points. So is it like, when you're as filmmakers in this subgenre and like playing in this world, how do you find that normalcy? Like, is it hard not to make a caricature versus what feels normal for like the YouTube faux doc generation?
I think it is very hard. Tropes are easy, and I'm not saying our film doesn't have tropes, but like we wrote several versions of this film, not even just because it started as a podcast, but like there was a time where we essentially had to write the found footage version of it, where it was just like, okay, here's all of the events of what is actually going to be captured on a camera. Then take that, deconstruct it into, okay, if you had those events, how does the documentarian approach it? And then once they arrive to the town where this stuff happened, how do they fit into the story? And so I think in sort of reverse engineering it that way, we kind of avoided, hopefully, some of the tropes of feeling like it was too much of a YouTuber. And we did watch certain true crime stuff and sort of take away like, oh, we don't want to do that. Like, I have a pet peeve against drones. So I was like, I don't want a drone shot like slowly scrolling over the town from 500 feet up. But I think one of the other things, I don't know if you remember when we did this, Paul, was kind of somewhat late in the process. Before we started filming, we got rid of everything in the script that was kind of like, and then what happened next blew your minds. Like we could have never seen it coming. What would happen when we got to the church or something like that. We got rid of all of those very true crimey tee ups of like, oh, we just got back from the commercial break, or we're going into a commercial break. Like we got rid of anything that was a speed bump, and it was just to like, okay, we're gonna power train through this whole story.
Yeah, and I think too, something you were talking about, Donato, I can't remember exactly what you said, but you got me thinking about how like William Magnuson, who plays Lucas Page in the man of Man Finds Tape, filming with him he had a heavy task to do, right? Because he's playing a character who then, when filming his YouTube videos, is playing a persona, right? And so we did so many takes with him finding that character and then crafting it in the edit to make that feel real, because nobody on YouTube is just speaking 100% honestly, right? There is a wall there. And so finding ways to kind of see the honesty peek in, or there's one scene in particular where he is just where you're seeing the layer peeled back and that sort of thing. It was really difficult to do. And I don't envy anyone doing it, and I don't want to do it again. But he was great. He was great to work with, but it is tough.
It's tough for any actor to put on a performance within a performance, for when that performance has to match a very certain style. But we had this sort of extra meta layer where it's not just his literal performance that matters. It is the performance of the video that you're watching. So like his YouTube videos are edited like and shot like YouTube videos, where it not arbitrarily, but it punches in at certain points and then pulls back out again, like just those little quick zooms and edits and jumping around, and it was a lot of fun to build that stuff in, but it is super fucking tedious to make a movie this way. It's very, very tedious.
And also the additional layer of he's kind of a boy who cries wolf character, and there's layers to the truth. Even in the YouTube videos, outside of them, the relationship with his sister, and then finding the balance of like in the performance and in the edit, how much do we as the audience trust the words coming out of his mouth? He is an unreliable narrator.
But that goes to what we were talking about a little bit ago of the sense of falling down these meta rabbit holes. Is part of you wants to believe, wants to suspend logic and go with the story, and so we had to find the right balance where it was, all right, I'm going along for the ride, I'm falling down the rabbit hole.
We're going to take a quick break here because I know that you guys brought a movie that you want to talk about too. And sometimes it feels like a natural separation between when we're talking about a filmmaker's work and the movie they brought for us. I think the lines between your film and the film you brought to discuss today are murky and blurry in the best possible way. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Noroi the Curse. All right, welcome back. So today, the apostles, Peter and Paul, have brought us a film that I think is very reflective of a lot of the ideas that they have in their movie as well. So the film is Noroi the Curse, and if you haven't seen it, here is a quick plot synopsis for you. Filmmaker Masafumi Kobayashi tells stories too strange to be believed. As a paranormal investigator, he's often on the front lines of unexplained phenomena, even if his work is more reality television fodder than award-winning journalism. But when Kobayashi's latest case starts to develop real legs, leading him to unearth the secrets of an abandoned village and a demon named Kagutaba, he may not be ready for the truths that he finds. For American audiences, Koji Shiraishi's Noroi the Curse has long been a hard-to-find gem, but its audience has grown in recent years with a prime placement on Shudder. So, quick story, we actually, last year at the Brooklyn Horror Film Festival, we don't record the live episodes we do, that's just for the fans in attendance. We did Noroi the Curse with Sam Zimmerman. We had a really good conversation. He was a fun guy to talk to. He has some shitty opinions on how many dogs should die in a movie that I'll never forgive him for. Spoiler alert, he's pro dead dogs. But I was bummed that we didn't have, that I was like, oh, this is such a good film. It's too bad that we didn't get a recording. I am so glad that you guys picked this and that this is the actual one that lives on, because I think it's such a fascinating and complementary piece to Man Finds Tape. Paul, I want to start with you because we were texting back and forth and this was the first movie. You were like, can we talk about this one? What made this one jump out?
Well, I mean, you told us the format, the small number of reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, and I don't know what it was in my head. It was like the second film I searched. I think I searched Lake Mungo, which had plenty of reviews,
yep.
And a great film. And then I searched for Noroi, and it had, I think, like two reviews or something like that. And I just immediately messaged Peter. I was like, hey, I feel like this one's a slam dunk because it's related. It's interestingly enough, like this is a film that we were not inspired by, believe it or not. I only watched the film like 2 weeks before we went into principal photography on Man Finds Tape.
And I watched it for the first time this past weekend.
Hey,
yeah. And because at the time I was just watching a bunch of found footage, faux documentary films, just see what I could pick up. And I remember watching that and think it's especially certain moments where it starts talking about worms and things, and I had like an uh-oh moment. Are we ripping this off? And I think there's actually like an unintentional reference in there with like a shrine. Anyway, but Peter and I have a love for J-horror, and I think that's pretty clear when you see Man Finds Tape and where it goes. There's a lot of Junji Ito influence in there, and a lot of kind of tryptophobic kind of stuff. And so, this just felt like a no-brainer to talk about because of the format, the J-horror of it all. It just feels very much in the wheelhouse of the kind of stuff that excites Peter and I.
When I was watching it again for the first time, like 48 hours ago, I the first like 20 or 30 minutes or so, I was like, God, man, this movie's fucking cool as hell. And then they started talking about ectoplasmic worms and a couple other ideas. And I was like, oh, it's a little too similar to Man Finds Tape. Did we accidentally rip this movie off? Thankfully, we go very different directions. But I think the one thing that, even though it wasn't a direct inspiration on how we made Man Finds Tape, I do feel a weird kinship to this film all of a sudden, because it does what Paul and I strive to do, which is it's so sincere, and it's never winking at the audience. It's not undercutting its story, no matter how weird and out there it gets. It is all done with the utmost straight face and complete commitment to the bit. And that's what our sort of goal with Man Finds Tape always was, because our story is very fucking weird at times, and it goes to some crazy big places, and this does as well, and it never underestimates the audience's ability to sort of keep up with the weird folklore it's crafting and the story it's telling. It sets you up for a ride and then takes you on it. And that's what we had wanted to do with Man Finds Tape.
I love, one of the things that I love that is an accidental connection between the two films. When we talk about found footage, a lot of found footage is like the film that was shot or the materials that were shot by the people that are the subjects of the movie. But both your film and Noroi both deal a lot with digital ephemera. There is, in Noroi, of course, it has a ton of scenes with like Japanese daytime television, these clips that are edited into the movie. So much of your film, of course, deals with these late night religious broadcasts, these like basic cable or cable access broadcasts that were going out regionally. Peter, we'll go with you first. What makes those kind of like bits of digital ephemera or analog ephemera such fun things to play with as a filmmaker?
It's for us, it was sort of twofold. I think we mapped out all of that extra stuff that would go into the film, because I mean, some of it is very relevant to the plot, and we're playing a clip from Reverend Endicott's The Salvation Hour, his public broadcast show, because it's, you know, thematically relevant or whatnot. But we created and shot so many more elements and fake Reddit threads discussing the videos and comment sections and all of that, because it would make the story feel bigger than it was. It's not cut and dry where like you only are telling the audience very specific moments. We are actually hinting at a larger world at all times by just showing, by saying like, oh, you could go to this faith healing website and learn something about Reverend Endicott Carr. You could watch from his YouTube video. You could see security camera from this church. There's all these different, creating a lot of different sources just makes the story feel bigger. And that was one of the things that I was really struck by with The Curse as well, is it is so fun to play around with delivering the story from unexpected places. So one of the things that I think they do so well is you're watching a daytime talk show and you don't know what the end result is. You don't know. It kind of throws the audience off because you don't know where the story is going to go. You don't know what is going to be the relevant takeaway in that moment. And I feel like that was one of the things that, in retrospect, Paul and I were trying to do with Man Finds Tape, is that like if you come to a part in the story from an unexpected direction, the audience is going to be strung along and waiting to figure out why is this thing that I'm watching relevant? And then, not that a twist happens or anything like that, but if there's an unexpected moment for the audience, it kind of throws you off, and you're like, oh shit, I didn't know that would happen in this type of media that I was being shown at that moment.
Yeah, I think everything we're talking about here is traditional kind of narrative filmmaking storytelling practices, but when it's done in this kind of fictional documentary way, it's almost kind of masked a bit. It's a bit of even more of a mystery, to Peter's point. Why am I watching this daytime talk show footage? What does this have to do with it? But it can become so satisfying because in the third act of The Curse, it once you see all of these elements coming together, the aborted babies, all this kind of stuff, and what it all adds up to, it's so unsettling but narratively satisfying. And it's kind of just using standard regular filmmaking storytelling techniques, but again, just kind of masked in a way where it surprises you if it's done well.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that they did very, very well that we also tried to do was never really sensationalize the moments. Like it was, we wanted to avoid the true crimey thing where it was like, we're gonna tell you how fucking grisly this moment is and then show it to you. We have a score throughout the whole film, but it is supplemental. It's not sort of like building and foreshadowing what's going to happen. And it's kind of like the same thing for them, where they're every now and then, like you're sort of living in the moment for a while, and then the score kicks in to remind you that, like, oh, you are in a piece of filmmaking. And so that was another thing that we did. But it's also using these sort of mixed media and the digital ephemera it's something that everyone is familiar with. Like, particularly for us, the Reddit screenshots, the YouTube comment screenshots, is it's creating, like, you're showing this mundane thing that it creates a sense of familiarity, because we've all, at least if you're into weird stuff like we are, I would assume, we've all come across these kinds of threads and these kinds of videos, and it makes it feel more tangible. We never thought that anyone would watch this movie and think that it was a real documentary, because the events that happen in it are not. They are increasingly surreal and unreal. So we were never trying to, like, pull the wool over people's eyes and convince them that it was real. But at the same time, we wanted to approach everything as realistically as possible, so that we, again, weren't sensationalizing it. We were making it feel like this was stuff that was actually discovered.
Yeah, I feel like putting one of those stingers, or, whether it's text or voice, of saying what happens next is going to chill you to the core or some shit like that. You're just kind of setting yourself up for failure. Half movies can't really deliver on that. Again, we're horror fans. We have been overjoyed and we have been bamboozled when we know the other side of it. But I do think what The Curse does really well goes to what you're both kind of talking about. And you're always in the moment, and you're always experiencing the same thing that Kobayashi is experiencing for the first time. And the movie never gets ahead of itself and overplays its hand. It still wants it to unfold in a narrative nature, that it's telling you a story, and that story is unknown. And the way it expands too, it really does feel like one of those kitchen sink movies, because not only is it just the investigation of a curse in a town and all this stuff, but you have an actress playing herself in Marika Matsumoto, and, like, legitimate actress playing a fictional version of herself in the movie who gets involved in some way. You have Hori, like the crazed lunatic covered in aluminum foil. Sorry, covered in aluminum. That's a different movie. That's Iron Man. It's bizarre. It's out there. The fetuses, the imagery, everything is so taking risks, and yet it's always more haunting than it is scary. I mean, as a J horror fan, obviously Going to the Ring is a much scarier film, where to me The Curse feels more ominous and foreboding, but it never really has that real pure jump scare. And I think that might, like, it's some people struggle where, like, again, it's a long movie too, but I don't know, there's just something, you just get caught up in the film and you just kind of drift through it in a way that is so hazy and unsettling. And you don't have to have that Ring-esque jump scare to be successful.
Yeah, I think it's always, for any film, but this film does it particularly well, it's always better to do something memorable, to take a big swing, even if the execution of it isn't going to be the most technically impressive thing. It's better to take those narrative risks and do something wacky. Like it's better to risk coming off wacky than to not even attempt it because you're worried it'll become off wacky. And I think that this does it very well. Like on paper, you could describe the aborted ghost fetuses and all this stuff, and it could sound very wacky. Likewise, for Man Finds Tape, if you just write down beginning to end, this is what happens, it can sound pretty wacky, but it's hopefully memorable. Like it's taking leaps and swings and showing the audience places they've never been.
And to that point, it's like I feel like when you're making indie genre cinema, you just have to go for it. You just cross your fingers that it's going to work, because nobody cares to just see a diet Blumhouse movie when they can just watch a Blumhouse movie, right? Like they can watch an A24 movie. Like, don't make the diet version of that, the Mr. Pibb of it. It's like do the thing that only you can do. If it works, it works, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. But at least you try to do something unique. And I think The Curse absolutely does that, and is kind of a testament to it. I'm kind of shocked thinking as we're talking about it, I'm like, how has Hollywood not tried to remake this movie? Because I feel like it doesn't directly translate to like an American audience with the plot and the demon and the ritual and all that. But I'm like, you can adapt it. If anybody's listening with a lot of money, just hit up me and Peter. We'll adapt it. We'll write that.
I mean, this movie, it's great. It's the kind of thing that like I had a bit of a roller coaster watching it, because I was like on the hook and I was like, this is exact kind of tone that I love. And then it started having a few thematic or just like mechanical lore overlaps with us that I was like, oh shit, are we in trouble here? And then we ended up not being, and then it was just like a full roller coaster where I was just in it the whole time. And I wished that I had seen it going into Man Finds Tape. I don't know that we would have changed or done anything differently. It probably just would have been validating that we were on the right path. Because as many found footage movies as there are out there, there's still not a ton of strictly fictional documentaries that take the sort of approach that we did, that Lake Mungo did, that The Curse does. There are a few out there that are really, really good examples. And then there are a few that, kind of start as a documentary and then become just a straight found footage movie. And sort of committing to the bit is the thing that we strived to do. And so it was validating to see another one that did it. And we're like, yeah, you can be weird and sincere at the same time.
And I think a lot of that comes from, in both films, sort of the surrounding cast, right? So like Noroi, The Curse really leans into its rural nature, and you meet this group of people that the filmmaker encounters over his travels and his investigation that all feel that just scream oddness on the screen, but also feel completely at peace and at one with the environments that they're in. You buy them as the local. Everybody from a small town, you can rattle off first names of like 6 people that are just local color that you know who they are. That was another thing that I really liked about Man Finds Tape, is this idea that there are a lot of characters in your film that are odd, strange, a little larger than life on the screen, but feel completely at home in small town, rural Texas, and feel like you absolutely would walk into a barbecue store and this guy would be behind the counter. So Paul, I'll go with you this time. How do you balance sort of the local character, like those local flavor type pieces, to create something that it fits the film so well, but also, again, like goes there, pushes it a little bit?
I mean, I think, I'll kind of speak broadly about the town to begin with, but when Peter and I are talking about this, right, it's, we live in Austin, Texas, and if you travel just like 30 minutes in one direction, it feels like you're in the middle of nowhere, Texas, right? And if you're ever traveling across Texas, you're going by so many of these towns and driving, you're driving 70 miles an hour, and then like in 10 seconds, it's, the speed limit drops to like 25 miles an hour. And everybody knows you got to slow down because the local sheriff are waiting for you to pull you over and give you a ticket. Yeah. And you're driving through these small towns and you're just like, man, there's so many people here that just, this is their entire life. This is their entire world. And not in a negative way, but it's just, they people grow up there and live there and die there. And what's going on in these small towns. And this makes up so much of Texas, but so much of our country. And I think we just kind of got fascinated with the idea of building out, one of these towns and kind of just exploring the weirdness of it. That might feel totally natural when you live there, but when you kind of examine it, feels strange. And I think with all of the cast, or the characters that make up the town, we just wanted to kind of give everybody a little bit of weirdness, a little bit of something, just to feel like it just, everybody's weird in some way. Mm-hmm. Right. And hopefully it made it feel real. I don't know, Peter, do you want to expand on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was always fun to write out the little and flesh out the corners of the town and give it a sense of continuity, that there is a story and there are people living here even when the film and the filmmakers aren't there watching it. No one has a sort of like single purpose and then they're done. Like you get the idea that this story is continuing to play out whether anyone ever filmed it or not. And it's, it's just fun to write characters that are slightly off. And then the cast was fantastic and everyone was up for the weird way that we did things. Particularly, for example, Judy, who plays the twins, which is one actress playing two people that we just doubled, which was great. We weren't sure if it was going to work, and it worked really, really well. There was one point where I think Aaron Moorhead had either forgotten or never learned that it was one person playing both characters, and once he realized it, he was like, "Oh shit!" So that
I fully thought it was like on our VFX breakdown, and he was like, "Why is this a VFX shot?" And we're like, "Because we're split screen," and all. He was just blown away. We're like,
fully thought it was two actors. I had no idea it was one actor until just now. So well done.
That was just oldest trick in the book. Just don't move the camera, don't change the lighting, and just split it down the middle. It was a really simple effect.
Yeah. And that was this sort of perfect example of what we were just talking about, where if those were two different people who were 15 years apart or whatever, who were just the Weber sisters are these characters' names, you would still get some like weird church lady vibes from them, but just doing that one little subtle trick of they're twins and they are played by the same person, so that you get that sort of extra weird layer to it. It just makes it feel slightly off.
Yeah, I mean, it's like watching Willow Creek, but not doing any of the preamble of the two characters meeting all the Squatchers and getting like the backstory. Like, you need that little bit of storytelling to instead like build the world, build the universe out, because we've all seen the movies that drop you into a scenario and there is a level of horror that definitely comes along with that. I have no idea about my surroundings, but I don't know, like when you're talking about something that is dealing with, you mentioned creepypasta, cryptic, all this other stuff. I want a bigger universe there. So it definitely is there. And it gives those Willow Creek, Shelby Oaks, go down the list of all that small town vibe we like to get lost in as the interviews and stuff are kind of going on.
Yeah.
And I know usually when we start to wrap one of these episodes, we'll talk about how you think the film that you brought is eligible for rediscovery. In this case, Noroi the Curse, available on Shudder. You should definitely go check it out. One of Peter's favorite films as of 48 hours ago. So that's a vote of confidence. Like if you heard the two of them be like, "Oh shit, did we accidentally plagiarize?" having neither of them seen it before they sat down and wrote it. That's a really good compliment, I think. But because our MO on Certified Forgotten is underseen cinema, and because your film has not been seen by anybody just yet and will be seen by everyone starting this weekend, I would like to end with talking about how you want your film to be received. What do you hope coming out of Tribeca this weekend, coming out of other festivals that you may play, as well as when it's finally available more widely? What do you hope people walk away with after having seen Man Finds Tape? And Peter, we'll start with you.
I mean, I think my hope would be that people just have fun with it. It's interesting that Paul and I have gotten so close to the material that it's for us, we would be perfectly happy if people were just like, "Oh, that was a weird, fun movie." Some of the people who have seen it early are getting freaked out by it and are scared by aspects of it. And that's not necessarily something that we were, to be perfectly honest, anticipating. So I'm very curious to learn the reactions. It's the kind of thing that we made this movie in secret, basically. Didn't tell anyone who was involved. Some people knew that Paul and I were making a movie, maybe didn't necessarily know that Justin and Aaron and Dave were involved, and then Cargill down the line and whatnot. So it's exciting for people to just discover it. I think my number one takeaway is that I hope people feel like they fell down a rabbit hole while watching it. That it has that sort of familiarity that you've watched something late night that you came across on cable or whatever, where you're like, this is weird, and I'm gonna stick and see how this story plays out. That's my hope.
I think I echo everything Peter just said, but also I'm just really, this podcast and other interviews we're doing before it premieres, we're not really digging into the story and characters, obviously, because we don't know when the general public is going to be able to watch it quite yet. But I'm really excited to just hear what questions or thoughts or comments that the audience has about, because it's a movie that answers questions but leaves a lot unanswered, leaves a lot for you to interpret that we have answers to. But I really want to see what people kind of think and how they connect to characters and the plot, and an alternate point of view on what they think happens and what means certain things. One of my favorite things in the process is we had a couple friends come over to my house, Peter, Chris, and Tasha, and they are not filmmakers, they're just friends, and we showed them the movie, and the movie ended, and they kind of both watched the movie from different perspectives. Chris watched it very analytically, and Tasha watched it very emotionally. And so they both kind of missed certain things while they were thinking about elements. And then they were asking questions, and we just sat back and let them discover it. And through their conversation for like 15 minutes after the movie, they basically like understood the whole movie through their conversation and answered each other's questions. And that was just a joy to watch. And we also got some really great feedback from them. And it was a joy to watch. So I can't wait to get questions from people about, was this about this? And is this a metaphor for this? And I just want to hear how people interpret it.
I hope you guys are ready for all the things that you didn't intentionally put in the movie that folks extract from it, like the Freudian nightmare that is your movie, that now people are going to be like, clearly the director had a bad childhood. And you're like, oh shit, no, I thought I had a fine childhood. Where's this coming from?
Yeah.
There was a lot of stuff that this is the kind of movie that it's because Paul and I put in so much efforts and rewrote it, and there were so many different versions of it, that when we needed to solve a problem in the edit or introduce something new, there was always like the film itself already had a solution. And we kind of realized like, oh, we can say this thing because thematically it ties into this other thing that we had been talking about the whole time. And so there's a lot of repeated imagery and themes that were intentional, and then some that just very naturally we emerged and that Paul and I didn't realize until after the fact. And it was like, oh, of course that makes sense in retrospect. So I'm very excited to see the stuff that Paul and I didn't plan that people pick up on, and that makes us look smart as if we were smarter than we were.
We always talk about how we just work in service of the movie, and like I fully believe it. The movie reveals to us what it's supposed to be, and I know that sounds very hippie, new age, whatever, but it's the truth. There's so many surprises that we find within the finished film. It's ridiculous.
Well, congratulations to the proud parents of this new baby, who definitely will go through some round of therapy to figure out their daddy issues at some point.
Thank you.
Man Find State premieres this weekend at the Tribeca Film Festival. Folks are going to want to see it, and I know that the best place to probably get updates on if it's showing at other festivals, when it's going to have a home video release, etc., is to follow you on social media. So, Paul, let's start with you. Where do folks connect with you online?
Sure. I basically at this point I just use Instagram. So it's just at Paul Gandersman. I'm sure my name will be in like the show notes or something. So just that, all one word. And then also Peter and I we have like our film team account, which is just at Arcanum Pictures, ARCANUM Pictures, on Instagram as well.
And then I'm not a super heavy social media user, but where I do use it, I'm just Peter Hall Human. So that's at Instagram, Blue Sky.
Blue Sky as well.
And yeah, so we will definitely be updating. We will probably be quite obnoxious about this film. Because as indie filmmakers, you have to beat the drum over and over just to get people to pay attention. But B, we're just very excited for people to discover it. Good, bad, hate it, love it. I don't know. I'm so curious to see what the reactions to it are going to be.
Donato, I know you don't have a movie in the way, but how do folks connect with you online so that they can see your criticism, your remake articles, all the good stuff you got in the pipeline?
You can follow me, as always, at DonatoBomb, DonatoBomb. And that's going to be Blue Sky, Letterboxd, and Instagram most prominently. As Monagle said, I've got a new Revenge of the Remakes up, dug into the Rabid films, one good, one fucking terrible. And other articles on the way. As always, I never sleep. That is why I sound like a zombie half the time, but Monagle deals with me because he loves me.
It's true. I do, unfortunately. You can follow me online. It's just Blue Sky for me, a little bit of Instagram as well, but that's Monagle at both, I think. I can't remember what my Instagram handle is anymore. More importantly, you should follow Certified Forgotten. You can follow the podcasts on Spotify, YouTube podcast, all the good things, all the places you normally go to. And visit certifiedforgotten.com. You can sign up for our newsletter by scrolling down to the bottom of the page. Or if you are so inspired, you can also just subscribe, give us a little bit of money, and make sure we have more space to invite cool people like Peter and Paul onto our podcast and do more episodes with them. Speaking of which, it was great to have you both at the same time. Quite a fun trial run for us. Worked perfectly. You guys really are amazing collaborators. But Peter and Paul, I hope maybe we can have each of you back individually sometime soon to talk about a movie that you want to discuss as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This was great. We loved it. I loved it. I won't speak.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm happy to come back and talk movies all the time. I will say that the under 10 limit was kind of tough, but I came up with some stuff to talk about. So if in the future we're doing separate ones, just hit me up.
Yeah, you can talk to our booking agent, whose name is Matt Donato. Speaking of Matt Donato, you want to take us home?
My God.